All right, welcome back. We are ACI Course 12, Class 3 on March 29th, 2026. Let's gather our minds here as we usually do. Please bring your attention to your breath until you hear from me again. Now bring to mind that being who for you is a manifestation of ultimate love, ultimate compassion, ultimate wisdom, and see them there with you. They are gazing at you with their unconditional love for you, smiling at you with their holy great compassion. Their wisdom radiating from them, that beautiful golden glow encompassing you in its light. And then we hear them say, bring to mind someone you know who's hurting in some way. Feel how much you would like to be able to help them. Recognize how the worldly ways we try fall short. How wonderful it will be when we can also help them in some deep and ultimate way, a way through which they will go on to stop their distress forever. Deep down, we know this is possible. Learning about emptiness and karma, we glimpse how it's possible. And so I invite you to grow that wish into a longing. And that longing into an intention. And with that intention, we turn our minds back to our precious being. We know that they know what we need to know, what we need to learn yet, what we need to do yet to become one who can help this other in this deep and ultimate way. And so we ask them, please, please teach me that, show me that. And they are so happy that we've asked. Of course, they agree. Our gratitude arises We want to offer them something exquisite. And so we think of the pure world they are teaching us how to create. We imagine we can hold it in our hands and we offer it to them, following it with our promise to practice what they teach us, using our refuge prayer to make our promise. Here is the great earth, filled with fragrant incense and covered with the blanket of flowers. The great mountain, 4 lands, wearing the jewel of the sun and the moon. In my mind, I make them the paradise of a Buddha and offer it all to you. By this deed, may every living being experience the pure world. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamya Tayami. We go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest community. Through the merit that I do in sharing this class and the rest, may we reach Buddhahood for the sake of every living being. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest community. Through the merit that I do in sharing this class and the rest, may we reach Buddhahood for the sake of every living being. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest community. Through the merit that I do in sharing this class and the rest, may all beings totally awaken for the benefit of every single other. So last class, we started talking about the different ways that different groups explain that topic called the 2 truths. The 2 truths not actually being 2 truths, but 2 realities, deceptive reality and ultimate reality. And we learned that one way, that one way to divide people's different understanding is by way of the understanding of people's whose belief is on the level of what's called the functionalists, as compared to those whose belief is on the level of what's called the middle way. And the functionalists, we learned, is a combination of people at the level of what's called the detailists and the level of what's called sutras, and then the Mahayana level of what's called mind only. And they're all called functionalists because for different reasons, they hold that if something performs a function, then that thing has to truly exist. What establishes something as real is when it does something. Middle way, their view is no object has any nature of its own. Any quality or characteristic that comes from it or seems to come from it is unique to the experiencer of it. We can only experience what our own karma forces us to experience. So it's not really that they're having a discussion. What does it mean to be a functioning thing? So they're like talking on these different levels in a way. And so we want the discussion or the argument to go a different way. Like in my own mind says, why doesn't middle way directly address what Mind Only School is saying and help them figure it out. And right, even my wish that they do that is revealing a misunderstanding that I'm still holding. So then also part of last class, we learned that in this discussion about deceptive reality and ultimate reality, we come to see that there can be two different kinds of people, two different kinds of beings. One is any being who has had the direct experience of ultimate reality, and anyone who hasn't. So to have that experience just once forever changes us in a certain way, such that we become what's called Arya or Pakpa, that you don't like stamp that on your forehead and walk around with it, but it's a way that you relate to your own self differently than you ever did before, to be Arya or to be Pakpa. So then we talked about, is the direct perception of emptiness different between someone who's doing it for the first time, someone who's doing it again, versus someone who's doing it constantly, perpetually, as in a Buddha? And we learned that the emptiness that's being experienced directly is identical for all of them. And when they're not in it anymore, for those that come out of it, the effect that it has on their mind, and so therefore their behavior is different according to the level of understanding and practice that they went into it with. So to have our first direct perception of emptiness with bodhicitta in our motivation, we come out on that first Bodhisattva bhumi, and we're working with our misunderstanding our world in a specific way that focuses mainly on our practice of giving, but meaning our belief in our me and mine getting the things that I want as the source of my happiness, versus understanding sharing things with others as this source of happiness, not the ultimate one, but contributing to it. And then that being is going to have a direct perception of emptiness again. But they're different than they were from what they were when they went into it for the first time, right? And then the experience, the emptiness is identical, and they come out and now focusing to a greater extent on their avoiding harming others, their morality. But depending on other factors of them going into that experience, that morality may not just be avoiding harming, but also gathering goodness, and doing both, motivated to be able to bring all beings to their ultimate happiness as well. So the practice of moral discipline goes deeper. And then happens again to move us onto the bhumi, where our focus is the of not angry, right? Developing the no more anger seeds, and then joyous effort. So bit by bit, each time we go into and come out of that direct perception, our focus of our practice is growing. It's not like you leave one and then focus on the other, as we learned about how the six perfections work together. So then lastly, in last class, we talked about that term natural nirvana versus the nirvana that is cultivated. And then they say, well, there are these two kinds of nirvana, but it's not really two kinds of nirvana. It's like the term nirvana is being used for the empty nature of any existing thing. And then, of course, nirvana that we would attain, conscious beings would attain, is referring to the practice result of finally having stopped all our mental afflictions and seeds for those because of the change in our behavior that we cultivate because of having had our direct perception of emptiness for the first time. All right, so today's class goes more deeply into these two realities, deceptive reality and ultimate reality. And it zeroes in on this differing understanding of the difference between those two realities, or the relationship between those two realities, as it's held by the mind-only school and how it's held by middle way school. So we learned that ultimate reality is that object which, when we come into contact with it, direct contact with it, it leads to our reaching nirvana or Buddhahood, which means happy forever. And without reaching that contact, nothing that we do will bring us the happiness that we seek. It's the nature of ultimate reality that to experience it directly puts us on that conveyor belt in the stream to the end of all suffering. Then deceptive reality is our reality in which the way things appear to us is not the way they really exist. And as long as we keep experiencing things to exist in the way they appear to us, then we will continue to act towards those things in ways that actually perpetuate our unhappiness in our very effort to get happiness, because we're misunderstanding the object that we are interacting with. And of course, misunderstanding ourself doing the interacting. And so because of that perception, that's a misperception, but we don't know it to be a misperception, we perpetuate our illness, old age, death, and rebirth. So through the course of Lord Buddha's teachings, and then afterwards, like two main divisions of, I don't want to say belief systems, but two main divisions of people's ability to understand what Buddha had taught developed. And there are different ways that are trying to describe what this ultimate reality is like. Now, Buddha taught both of these ideas. And so there's a so-called wrong one and a so-called right one. And over the centuries, it's still a great debate as to which one is the right one and which one is the wrong one, because we want something to be in it from it that can finally determine which is right and which is wrong. That's the subject matter of our course 15, what the Buddha really meant. So an enlightened mind knows what our minds need, what we need, like in the moment, and what we need to go through in order to reach this truth. And so that being is going to teach us at the level that we can grasp and work with it. And then they'll teach it again at a maybe different level, and then again and again, according to who needs what when. Geshe said, if you were an amateur ice skater and you've been just skating around the rink, and then you see somebody do a triple jump and you think, oh, I can do that. And you try it without ever having learned to do a single jump. The likelihood of being able to do a triple jump is probably remote. Is it possible? Sure. Is it likely? Probably not. And to say, oh, just teach me the highest understanding, Buddha, don't waste my time. Not like we would say that to him, I hope, but in our own mind, I don't want to waste my time with those lower ideas because they're wrong, And I don't know, we could hurt ourselves, I guess, is the implication from the ice skater analogy. As we learn these different levels of understanding what dependent origination and emptiness mean, as we get more familiar with what was taught, we can get more familiar with being aware of how our own me is reacting in a certain situation and actually recognize, oh my gosh, I'm my mind only school right now. Oh my gosh, I'm not even sutrist right now. I'm blaming that other so strongly. No, and that, in my experience, that's the purpose of going through these different understandings carefully and trying to explain them to ourselves and trying to recognize them, because we want to catch ourselves thinking, oh, I'm highest middle way, and then let somebody, right, blast out some nasty speech towards somebody because we think they need it for some reason, right? It's just like, yikers. So we do at first need to just learn the material, but then we start to really work with it. And from my own experience, that's when it starts to get interesting. It's when I can recognize it happening. Okay, so Buddha did teach in the Perfection of Wisdom teachings, nothing has any nature. And then it gets confusing to minds with seeds that believe everything has the nature of being the thing, right, that I experience. And when we hear nothing has any nature, our mind goes, well, if it has no nature, that means it doesn't really exist, right? And we know better. We've been trained not to think that. But I watch my own mind and it's like, it goes there so fast, and then just pull it back again because I know that's not right. But to hear something has no nature, it's hard not to say, well, then what's there? No nature. It should just disappear. And of course they don't. So when highest school says Nothing has any nature. Lower schools think that means they're saying, look, nothing is real. That's not what highest school is saying, that nothing's real. Right? We've been through it so many times. Here's our friend the pen. But we can also, like if I were to put this, I don't know, could I hold this thing up in such a way that you couldn't see it clearly enough? That you couldn't really make out what it was? That you'd see I had an object, but you didn't really see what it was until I got it closer up and then showed you like these details about it. And then information comes into enough of it till you go, oh, that's the pen. And by the time we do that, we can remember, oh, I couldn't make it out as a pen at first, but then she showed me enough information and now it's pen. So I could see it as not pen. And then once it becomes pen, it's a whole lot harder to see it as not pen. But having done it once, we can remember doing it. And it's like, oh, okay, right? Our mind can perceive something and not have the thing's identity. Like another example, you're driving by a big field and you look out in the field and you see a figure out there in the field. And you're going, is that the farmer? Is that, what is that out there? Because you can't quite make it up. And then you get more information. It's like, oh, it's a scarecrow. And then every time you look at it, it's scarecrow, even though it wasn't the first time you saw it. And you go, wow, I had to get more information to see what the thing was. We don't go, wow, that's cool. My karma didn't ripen scarecrow until that moment. And so it wasn't scarecrow until we don't do that unless we're trained madhyamikas, and then we play with it. But the automatic is, I just didn't get enough of its information to identify it. But what does that say about the identity of the object? Could it be that if the identity of the object is in it, from it, like we think, could it ever be that an experiencer of it could experience it in a way that didn't have enough information to identify it? If the object's identity had nothing to do with the experiencer of it, you could never not know what something was. You could never have the experience of getting more information and then it pops into view. And yet that really does happen to us often. Like it's not a theoretical thing. So what's really happening as we experience such a thing as I can't quite tell what it is, and then more information comes and then bing, it pops into view? We would say, you're at the point where I can't quite know what it is. My sensory apparatus is picking up information, but it's not quite enough information. And so my mind that's aware of that information is going, and then all of a sudden enough information shows up and the mind goes, pen, red and white pen. Sarani's red and white pen. Sarani's red and white pen that she's been talking about for months, right? All of that starts streaming out of the mind. But is that our experience of the object? For it to be streaming out. I don't know about you, but it's not mine. As soon as it's pen in it, from it. Even when I intellectually know that that's impossible, I'm still experiencing it that way. And then if it's a good pen, I like it. I want to keep it. If it's if it's an unpleasant pen, I want to get rid of it. So when we recognize that it's impossible for the object to be identifying itself in the way that we believe objects do, that recognition that there's no such object identifying itself is what we mean by the object has no nature. So we want to fill in those details. That object has no nature of defining itself. That object has no nature of being what it appears to be. That object has no nature coming from its own side. All these different subtle ways that we clarify what's meant by this object has no nature. No object has any nature. Because when our mind hears no object has any nature at all, never has, never could, never will, right? My own mind flops over automatically into, oh my gosh, nothing has ever existed. And it's the wrong conclusion. Even after I just heard myself explaining what it really means, my mind still misunderstands when I hear myself say it. The actually accurate way, which is nothing has any nature. Because we want so badly for there to be something that receives my label or something that influences how I put my label on. Right? Somehow all of those clingings make us think there's some kind of security in a world that says what it is so that I can believe it. But actually, there is no security in that kind of world. Because if that kind of world is an unpleasant world, then that kind of world is unchangeable by my behavior. And in which case, what I'm grasping to for solidity is the same as saying, I just want to continue to suffer. So, to say nothing has any nature is the explanation for how it is that different beings can perceive the same apparent object in different ways, which on one level we say, oh, we're all experiencing this red and white pen the same, but technically no two of us are experiencing it the same as the rest, and no me experiences it the same as the moment before, because I'm different by having experienced it again. And so it's different by my having experienced it again. There's only sensory information that my mind is putting a conclusion, identity, characteristic, quality, function, like, positive, negative, like, dislike, act. The whole string is flying out of my own mind seeds, creating that identity on every level. So the pen is not in the data. The pen is not coming from the data. The pen is totally my mind laying on that information. Totally, as is your mind, for the object that you are perceiving. So, says highest school, and so the pen is like an illusion because it appears to be a pen from its side out here with its own reality, when in fact, there's simply sensory information receiving my label that makes it into a pen. Because not every being does make it into a pen. So it cannot be a pen from its own side the way I think. So the illusion is that it looks like it's a pen from its own side. The truth is, it's not a pen from its own side. It's so simple. It looks like it has its own identity, but it doesn't have its own identity. Our experience and belief that things do have their own identity is what's meant by our ignorance. It's not that we don't know something, although we didn't used to know it. It's that we're holding on to something as present that's not present, never has been, and is impossible. Things seem to have their natures in them. Things seem to have their identities in them, which is how we would say, this is a pen, not a bicycle. There's nothing about it that's similar to bicycle. And yet, technically, is there any reason to say that with the empty nature of this object, I couldn't, in an instant, be holding a bicycle? Right? If my seeds ripen differently, and yet my own mind says, yeah, great, the next moment can be bicycle, but I would have to put the pen down and pick up the little bicycle, wouldn't I? No, technically not. Okay. So thank goodness we have some kind of consistency in our seed ripening, because what would life be like if it's like pen, then bicycle, then yelling boss, then, right? Just if there was this constant shape shifting that had no continuity, it would be scary, kind of like a bad dream. All right, so this experience where our subject side interacts with an object side, colored by the belief and therefore experience that the object's identity is in it from it when it's not that. That's what's meant by the illusion. Not that the thing's just made up, not that it's imaginary, not that it's not there at all. It's that the way we believe it's there isn't there. And so the way we believe it's there is illusory. So let me put up our vocabulary. Where's the sharing? The Tibetan for illusion is Gyuma, and Sanskrit it's Maya. The illusion means something appears self-existent but is empty. It's really that simple. And then when we try to describe something that's an illusion, like we're watching a movie and it looks like whatever's going on in the movie, but it turns out one of the actors in the movie is somebody you know, and you know them, right, as, I don't know, a waiter in your favorite restaurant. And then watching them in the movie kind of shifts the movie. The movie loses some of its reality for you because the person as not that character in the movie, and you can't help but think of them in the wrong way. They give Middle way gives us a definition of the illusion. Here, nangso dang netso mi tumpa. Nangso means the way it appears, meaning anything. So the way appearance is, and netso means the way it exists. So nangso dang netso is the way it appears and the way it exists. Mi tumpa means inconsistent. Geshe-la later is using the word discrepancy. There's a discrepancy between the way our friend the pen appears and the way it actually exists. We see it one way, but it can't actually exist in that way. The way it truly exists is different. Not that it doesn't exist at all. It just exists in a different way than the way we experience it to exist. So there's a discrepancy between our experience and the reality of the object. I like that analogy of a mirage, right? You're driving through the desert, the Wilcox Playa. It is a dry, dusty, flat place. And you can drive by that Wilcox Playa in August where it hasn't rained yet, hasn't rained for months, and see the cattle in the playa knee deep in water. And it's like, no, there can't be water there. But it looks like there's a lake, a pond of water. And then you get a little bit further along, and it's like, water's gone, just gone. And it's like, oh, that was the coolest mirage. And we know that there was never any water there at all, but it sure looked like there was water there. And when I recognized it wasn't water, it was a mirage, right? The mirage is there. What's the illusion? The illusion was the water, because I thought the water was there, but it was a mirage all along, right? And then it's like, no, the mirage is an illusion. No, it was real. And then you change circumstances, and then even the mirage disappears. But the water was what was never there to begin with. I could not have drunk that water at all. So when we say illusion, we mean something we thought was there, but isn't there like that. Not meaning an illusion like, I can't even come up with an example. Because even like a magic illusion, we're still just mistaking something for something else. But if there could be something that we think is very real, and then we go to interact with it and it just poofs, disappears, right? We would say, oh man, that was a hallucination, or like an illusion, like a hallucination, right? But then that one even fails too, because like I could be hallucinating, right? That there's popsicles in the air. And then when the hallucination stops and the popsicles in the air go away, the hallucination was there, just not popsicles. It's always going to end up the same way if we try to pin down what we mean by the illusion. But what my mind hears when somebody says, oh, it's illusion, my mind goes, oh, so it's not really there. Like there's nothing really there. And that's the wrong conclusion. Am I getting that across? Illusion means what we thought was there isn't there, but there is something else. As long as we understand the something else accurately. So I'm not saying once we understand the pen's coming from me accurately, now the self-existent pen is the one that's there. right? The self-existent pen is impossible. The dependently originated pen is not only impossible, here it is, but then which one is it? The one you see or the one I see? And which one do I see if it's doing this? Okay, so, okay, Maya. So when we are having the Chichok experience, perceiving the pot on the stove as a seed ripening identity onto sensory information. That's our experience of how things truly exist, of the Netzel, the pot on stove as a complete functioning mental image, as opposed to the real in and of itself pot on the stove that we used to interact with. It from its own side pot on the stove, we could never experience the front and the back or the top and the bottom at the same time. We think we do because the pot holds water. There has to be a bottom and sides and no hole. But all we actually experience is our particular view of that pot in it from it. And when we try to pin down, well, how much of that do I need for it to be pot? We actually could show ourselves that it's like, well, I can't ever experience the whole pot if the pot has its own nature. But this mental image ripening pot that we somehow see, we are experiencing it as a whole thing. And that allows the pot on stove experience to function because it's complete. The nongso is how things appear to a mistaken state of mind that doesn't know it's mistaken, which is with their identities in them coming at me. We can't help it. So that's one meaning of illusion, this discrepancy between how things appear and how they really exist. But there's a deeper meaning of the illusion for middle way, highest middle way. So they describe that from this experience of finally actually experiencing directly that the identity of the object is created by my own mind seed ripening. We understand that nothing I've ever perceived in the old way has been perceived correctly. We then go into meditation on that experience and should be able to slide into the direct perception of the fact that nothing exists in any other way than that, which means the direct experience of the empty nature of oneself and all existence. And then, as we've been taught, we will stir forth out of that for one reason or another. And as we come out of that, we go back to perceiving things as having their own natures, telling me what they are. But now, because of our direct experience of seed ripening and the nothing but, we can't believe it anymore, even as we're experiencing things in the old mistaken way, because now we know it's the mistake. Now we no longer believe the pan sending its identity at me, even though I experience it that way. And they say now we are experiencing the illusion because we really are knowing that we're experiencing things with their natures in them, and we know we're wrong. So now it's like we're seeing the water and knowing it's the mirage from the instant we see the water. We can't not see the water. We're still forced by the seeds that are ripening, that were planted with ignorance, to still perceive things ignorantly. But now it's easily the illusion because we know we're mistaken. So at this level, we are at a deeper level of experiencing the illusion than we were before that experience, right? Intellectually, we know things are illusory, but to experience it constantly is this more specific meaning of what it is to understand the illusion. When we no longer believe things have their nature in them, and we interact with those objects that seem self-existent, but we don't believe are, we are no longer replanting seeds for the belief in things self-existence, which is why we can say we are then on the conveyor belt to the end of suffering. Because until that time, we replant ignorance with every ripening. But after this set of experiences, we are now burning off those seeds colored by ignorance and not replanting them. And so we will also have from direct experience this understanding of the seed ripening being the result of ways in which we imprinted that seed into our mind in the first place. So we have this much deeper understanding of what's meant by the concept karma. And that means we also keenly are aware that if our friend the pen is experienced as a pleasant object, we know that it's a result of some kindness, and it means we want to do kindness with it or towards it because it's pleasant. We want to perpetuate pleasantness when it comes. And when something's unpleasant, we again are so keenly aware that it's only unpleasant as part of my mind seed ripening. It can only be unpleasant as a result of my own past seed planting. And so I don't want to plant more unpleasant. So this understanding after these of the illusion helps us influence our behavior choices because we know so directly that how I interact with those objects is where I am planting the seeds for future experience. So if we want to live in a world where, every object we experience glistens in rainbow light, is fragrant beyond belief, is a useful tool and is pleasurable to use, then we would want to study the kinds of attitudes and behaviors that would plant the seeds that could grow into those kinds of experiences. And those attitudes and behaviors are the Bodhisattva way of life. That's what we're studying. So we can create a paradise by way of our behavior because nothing has any nature. Because nothing has any nature, we can create them into pleasure perpetuated for everybody. If they had any natures, and those natures were unpleasant in any way, then we'd be stuck. Right. So how our karmic seeds ripen and in what order and what influences them, that's all part of different courses in our system. But we can learn, Geshe-la said back then, learn how to manipulate them. He still says that. But it feels to me not so much that we're manipulating our seeds as we are manipulating our behavior choices so carefully, right, that we are constantly planting seeds. Any way that they end up ripening will be good, pleasant, right? Progress. So Madhyamaka is saying things are illusions because they don't have any nature of their own, but they appear to have natures of their own, and that's what makes them illusion, because they don't. So the pen that radiates its penness to us is unreal because there's no such thing. The pen that doesn't radiate its own identity is very real. Which one is it? This one. The one for you, the one for you, the one for me. Will the real pen please stand up? Right. So this pen can be. So functionalists. Oh, I have 2 minutes. I'll start. Functionalists, the state of mind that holds that for something to be able to do something, it has to be a thing that can contact another thing and have some influence on that other thing. So for the pen to be able to contact a writing surface and create a change on the writing surface, the pen has to exist, the writing surface has to exist, contact has to be made, right? If contact's never made, no writing's going to happen. If the pen has no ink, no writing's going to happen. All kinds of different factors are in play here. that make it such that the pen, with the nature of being able to write, can be used for writing. Like my own mind goes, oh, phew, that's so much more familiar. Even when we say, I don't believe the pen's self-existent because it had to be made. Somebody gave it to me. I had to go to that health fair where they gave it to me. There are all these other factors that come into play that make this pen the pen. And with all those other factors, then this pen is the pen that I'm holding and it functions. And how do I know it's a pen? Because I can write with it. That's what pens do. So, no, pens are not self-existent, says my functionless mind. But this object has something pen about it, or else I could pick up my half a cough drop. And if my seeds ripen to write, I would be able to write with this half a cough drop. And my functionalist mind says no, because that's not what cough drops do. And so I want us to admit to ourselves that on some level we are still believing in functioning things have to have some nature of their own. Come on, some nature. Middle way, no nature. Not the object, not the subject, not the interaction between. And my mind hears that and it goes, ah, then how can anything happen at all? Because of those seeds of believing something has to be there. All right, let's take our break. Are we back? Mhm. So middle way is saying nothing has any nature. Everything is illusion. And the functionalist says, no, no, that can't be true because things that function have to be real. Their function shows they are real. Illusions don't work. You can't drink from a mirage. Middle way people, come on. Middle way says any functioning thing is unreal, and that's why it functions. That's why it can function, because those functions of objects is also not coming from the object's side the way it looks. Those functions are also karmic seeds ripening, luminous images of functioning happening. So function is, of course, also seed ripening results because nothing exists in any other way than as seed ripening mental images laid on to information. We can say that at this level, we'll go there eventually. Well, what about the information? Is it there first? Let's not go there yet. Functionalists think that by unreal or illusion is meant that the thing we're talking about does not exist at all. And it's hard for our mind not to go there when illusion and unreal means the thing coming from it is unreal, not just unreal, impossible. Nagarjuna teaches us. So this evolves into a whole school called Mind Only School, who holds two aspects of their explanation of what dependent origination and emptiness mean that we'll go into greater detail in future course 15 and when we do the 6 flavors practice module. And so for this part, we are delving into the rudimentary explanation that the group that comes to be called Mind Only holds to as their explanation of what dependent origination and emptiness is referring to by Lord Buddha. So Mind Only School in Tibetan is Samsam. Sam means mind, technically a suffering being's mind, and Sam means boundary, usually holding something together, but here it means mind only. Chittamatra in Sanskrit. So when Geshe was teaching this class, he was teaching a group of people that most had not studied in depth the different schools yet. They had an understanding that there were those different schools, but Geshe has been delving into Mind Only School in the translators class now for years. And the things that they talk about are really difficult points in the mind-only school, which are especially difficult if we don't have a good grasp of the simple points of mind-only school. But he's going much deeper these days into what's meant by mind-only school and those two extra consciousnesses versus other schools. And the fun thing with mind-only school is that it has enough accuracy that we could actually use it to live by, and it will help us get almost all the way to total Buddha. They say that at some point, some shift happens where we recognize, oh, phew, right? And now the no nature of its own makes perfect sense. It's like, I hear myself saying that, and it's like, it's all very theoretical, because once we've had the direct perception of emptiness, it means we've seen the seed ripening. We go into nothing exists in any other way than that. We come out, we have those four Arya truths, right? If that's all a string of events that are all tied together, and then we'll understand what mind-only school appeared to be misunderstanding. And maybe we recognize, oh, their misunderstanding was actually really, really helpful. And so it's not a school that we should necessarily go, oh, I'm going to learn it so I don't do it. Because we could actually learn it well enough to live by it, and we would do very well for a long time. Because it really, really does show us that we can't experience anything that's not our own karmic seeds ripening. And even when we're trying to be highest middle way, man, there'll still be something or somebody that we'll blame for something. And mind-only school helps us catch ourselves doing that without having to debate whether or not that thing we're blaming for our unhappiness really exists or not. Because our mind will automatically go to that consideration when we're trying to function at middle way. Is there really an angry yelling boss there or not? Mind only goes, of course there is. And they're really unpleasant right now. And it's all mind seed, my mind seeds laying on that angry yelling boss. I'm gonna behave nicer. And we don't have to decide whether or not they're really there or not. So mind only school, the like basic understanding of what they teach, what Buddha taught, is that dependent origination means that when I perceive this object, this pen, what's happening is there's this object, there's my eye power, right? The functioning of my sensory organ, the eyes, and what that does. And there's a eye consciousness, meaning the part of my mind that takes visual sensory information and makes it into some recognizable object. And mind only school says, it seems when we are experiencing an object, it seems like the object being there is coming from some kind of circumstances of its own. Like we wouldn't say the pen has karma, but we would say the pen has the causes and conditions to be here. And then we would say And I have the causes and conditions to be here with the ability of my eyes to pick up the information and the ability of my mind to recognize that object as a pen. So they say the mistaken understanding is that we think the object has its own karma bringing it here, and I have my karma making me see it the way I do, when in fact, the pen, my eyes seeing the information and my me knowing it as a pen, that all comes out of the same karmic seed. My karmic seed brings the pen, my eyeballs, my knowing pen all together, and bingo, here's my experience, me having a pen that functions. Because what do pens do? They write. So what's misunderstood, says Mind Only, is that we believe the pen has its own substance, they call it, when in fact, the pen I experience is my seeds and only my seeds. Technically, they say one seed. The pen being here, my eyeball, and my me knowing pen is all coming out of one seed. The pen with its own influence to be here for me, that's not there. The pen with its own causes and conditions, that's there. But that's brought to me by my karmic seed. So I can't blame the yelling boss for the unpleasantness of yelling at me, because my seeds bring them in the bad mood, me able to witness it, and me to have my reaction to it. That's all coming out of my seed. That's helpful, you see, because that means how I react to that angry yelling boss is going to bring more or not. So Mind Only still lands us in that arena of, oh, so my behavior is critical. Middle Way says there's nothing about that angry yelling boss that comes from their side. They have no nature. It's all my seeds ripening. And I don't know, I just felt my mind slip into it again. It's like, wow, it's all my projection. Like a laser light show on the wall. No real boss there at all. Well, if there's no real boss there at all, am I the only real thing? In which case I have to turn my same logic on me and come to the same conclusion. Well, I'm not a real thing either. And is that helpful? To decide I'm nothing but a laser light show? Not, because it's not true. Okay? We are real because we're empty, as we learned. Okay, so functionalists are arguing with Middle Way, saying, you guys say objects are illusions. They have no natures. So you, Prasangika, how can you perceive a non-existent pen's illusory nature? Like, how do you perceive the illusion, you Middle Way guys, if you believe that everything is really non-existent? Is that what Middle Way believes? That everything's non-existent? No, they don't believe that at all. You know why they don't just come out and say, we don't believe things are non-existent? Because it's not about proving right or wrong. It's about the investigation. So prasangikas say, yes, we can perceive the illusion in two ways. We can perceive the illusion intellectually in an explanation that we can perceive an object without its label and see that there's more subtle information that was receiving a label. We can show ourselves that by logic. We can show it to ourselves through experience. We can catch our mind making the label and laying it onto the object. And we can actually have the direct experience of that happening, which once we've done that by direct experience, we'll know it to be true. There are other factors that are coming into play that we'll get to later, that after that whole series of experiences, there will also be something else that's happened through which we know we weren't just imagining that seed ripening thing happening, right? That we were actually there experiencing it. So middle way goes on to say, and look, what about the mind itself? Like, to see the illusion of the pen is to recognize that the pen in it from it is not there the way I thought or I think. And so the pen that is here is the one that's my ripening seeds pen here. Still looks like it's out there on its own. But we intellectually and eventually directly know that that's not possible. So what about the mind itself? Like, what about the subject side? Are we only talking about the objects being illusory, but the me experiencing the object? Now there's a real thing. Because it has to be real, because it's having these experiences moment by moment. How can an illusory thing be so substantial? Right? And it's like, what a dumb question. How can a real thing be so substantial? If what we mean by real, in it, from it, the way that I think. So our mind is itself empty of self-nature. Our own mind has no nature at all. It is illusion also. It seems to have its own reality. It seems like it exists to be the one that has the projections. But how can it experience a projection without being part of the projection? If it has its own nature, it means it exists in some way independent of what it's experiencing. And how could you even establish that it's an existing thing if it's not experiencing something to establish it, right, as aware? Our own mind can't have any nature of its own. Our own mind, we believe it to have its own nature, and it doesn't. And in that way, it's illusory, but not non-existent. How do we know? Here we are, right? You can't negate that. Our own mind is not ultimate reality. It is deceptive reality. Right? It's an appearing thing. It has ultimate reality. Our own mind has no nature. That's its ultimate reality. Its deceptive nature is that it's seed ripening results of past behavior. There's always a mind. There's always your me side awareness with every experience. You will always have a me. And it, until nirvana or be it better, we will always experience it wrongly, right? Illusorily, until we are experiencing directly that it's part of every seed ripening. But I felt my own mind go, yeah, but who's ripening the karma, right? If I'm part of the karma, right? It's like, which is why we go over it again and again and again. Anyway, okay, so what about our understanding of this stuff? Is that got some kind of nature of being able to affect us in a way that will automatically make us change our behavior? Does our understanding of this stuff have some nature of its own? It can't, can it? Our understanding also is seed ripening identity onto more subtle information that, if it's a good thing, is a result of some past kindness. If it's unpleasant, I hope it's not, it's a result of some past unkindness. Right? There's nothing about our me, our experience, our growing wisdom, all these things that we're trying to progress through, none of it has any nature. All of it is illusory in the sense that we're holding them all to have some kind of nature's identities, qualities, effects on us, in them, from them, when they don't. They can't. And so when we have the direct perception of emptiness, it can and will affect our mind in the way that I've been talking about, but not because there's something in that experience that makes it happen. Do you see how slippery it is? It's like no other experience affects us in that way. There has to be something about the experience. There is something about the experience, but not in the experience from it as a ripening result, which is why it takes cultivating that experience with goodness, clearing out negativity. It's not really, seeing emptiness directly is not really about the willpower to sit on our cushion and park our mind on emptiness until it happens. It will be a results ripening from past kindness and nothing else than that. Which is why some people can hear the pen thing and roll their eyes, say big deal. Other people can hear the pen thing and it's like, oh my gosh, changes them in an instant. The rest, like me, is like, can we go through that again? Will you explain that to me again? Because it takes my seed changing effort to get it more deeply. So there's this term, we've heard it before, gawa, which sometimes it's spelled like this, and sometimes it's with a G, and sometimes it's with an A, and I don't know how to spell it really. But it's this term that means this goodness, like past seed planting, ripening goodness, where we just hear this thing about the illusion and we get goosebumps and realizations start popping, and how wonderful to have Kelwa. And it's a result of past study, service, etc. And if we don't have it, it doesn't mean we're losers. It just means we don't yet. We're building it. Okay. So mind, middle way has gone on so far to explain to the mind only school that even the mind is an illusion. The subject side is an illusion. And then mind only school says, well, then you just proved that you cannot experience the illusion because you just said your mind is not real. Your mind has no nature. And that means the mind can't be a functioning thing because you have to be real to function. So if your mind's an illusion, if your mind's not real, it can't function to perceive the illusion like you said you could intellectually and then directly. So any unreal thing can't do anything. Come on, middle way, folks. Admit that it, like, your view won't work because it means you're walking around, right, thinking you're unreal, thinking the things in your world are unreal. So you probably think nothing really matters because everything's just unreal. And middle way is going to roll their eyes and go, no, that's not what we're saying. Okay. So middle way says to mind only, well, we say that the illusion means that something looks like it exists in one way, but actually exists in a different way. What do you say is the illusion? And mind only says, yes, yes, we have an understanding of the illusion. And we say the illusion is when you look at your object out there and it looks like it's coming from its own karmic seed. That's the illusion because it's not coming from its own karmic seed. It's coming to us because of our karmic seed. Our karmic seed brings the pen, my eyeballs, and my mind to know pen all together. And ta-da, here's the pen, the real pen that functions. The unreal pen is the one that brought its own karma, brought it to me. That's not possible. Because if I didn't have the karma to know it as a pen, it would walk right in front of me and I would never recognize it as a pen. Right? It makes sense. There can be an object there that we don't have the karma to see as a pen. And even if somebody else did, we would never pick it up and use it as a pen. Mind only says if it was its own karma as a pen, we couldn't not use it as a pen because its karma would make us use it as a pen. Sounds familiar, right? It has to be the way we experience the object that makes the object what it is for us, our karmic seed. That's not different, significantly different from middle way. So middle way says to mind only, well, then how do you see the illusion? Mind only. If, wait a minute, the mind only says to middle way, you can't see the illusion because what you mean by illusion is that the thing you thought was there is not there at all. then you can't, there's nothing there to see. So you can't experience the illusion. And if the pen is the illusion, then that means the pen's unreal. Which means technically you can't even experience the pen, which is silly because here are pens. We are experiencing them. Of course, middle way answers saying, no, we can and do experience the illusion. I want them to say, because we have, right? I saw the pot on stove coming out of my own mind. They don't ever say that because that wouldn't prove anything to the one who's not believing them. It's their own direct experience. You can't use that to prove it to somebody else. Curiously. But they explain again how any experience that we're having is of a material world is sensory information that the mind is what's the word? Organizing, forced by its ripening karmic seed into an identity, qualities, characteristics, function as the seeds are shifting over the period of the experience. And to still see the object as having its own identity isn't to see the illusion. To see the illusion is when we know that we're experiencing it with the identity in it, but we know we are wrong. That's what it is, to see the illusion, because you're seeing it in real time. So mind-only school says to, no, middle way school says to mind-only school, what do you guys mean by dependent origination? Right? This is what we mean by dependent origination, that what the pen depends upon for me is my seeds ripening results of past behaviors, forcing my mind to take this information and make pen, red and white pen, good pen, bad pen, write a letter pen. That's what we mean by dependent origination. Every moment of my experience depends upon my seeds ripening. My seeds ripening are the results of seeds having been planted. How do I do that? By way of what my me is perceiving itself, thinking, doing, saying towards the object of my experience. And that's happening constantly. Seed planting constantly. Seed ripening constantly. And that process is me and my world, me and my life, moment by moment by moment. And anything existing in any other way than that is the illusion. It's impossible. So, mind only, what do you mean by dependent origination? And they say dependent origination is the fact that everything that I experience and my experiencing of them are produced by the same karmic seed, my karmic seed. My own past behavior, ripening result, is ripening as the object and me experiencing the object in the way that I do. It doesn't sound different, does it? But Mind only still insists with it that within that explanation is the fact that when I experience a functioning thing, which is just about everything, that functioning thing has some reality of its own. Because if it were nothing but my seed ripening, that's not substantial enough to affect another thing and create a change. So it's actually much more comfortable to be mind only school and say, yes, things function according to my karma without having to figure out whether they exist for real or not, which ultimately they can't and don't. But we can understand well enough at mind only school level to change our behavior enough that the ability to not fall off a cliff when we say, oh, nothing has any nature at all, can come out of our seeds. Middle way says dependent origination means that the existence of this pen depends upon my karma forcing me to organize these colors and shapes into pen. Mind only says this pen exists coming out, right? Having been brought to me from my seed ripening, me here, pen here, me knowing pen to use it. So mind only says dependent origination is the fact that something we experience and our experience of it appear to come from separate causes, but actually they come from the same karmic seed. Everything depends on my karmic seeds. That's dependent origination. More sophisticated than lower schools, because lower schools will say things are dependent origination because they have their own causes. They have their own parts. And that's true, but that's not helpful for us to change things from unpleasant things to pleasant things. So is there anything wrong with what Mind Only School says? Anything I experience and the experience of it seem like they're coming from separate causes, but in fact, they're all coming from my karmic seed. Nothing wrong with that. But if we're functionalists and we believe that something that can cause something else to happen has to have some reality of its own, then what does that say about our karmic seeds that are the causes for the thing I experience and me experiencing it to come together? Our karmic seeds functioning things. Yes. So they have to have some reality. And so all those karmic seeds, they have a reality, they have an existence, and they have to be somewhere while they're waiting to be the one that ripens into the experience and me experiencing it. Don't they? So they have to have a place to stay. They are things that have to have a place to stay. Mind only says they stay somewhere in our body, right? In that eighth consciousness, the refrigerator, the storehouse consciousness, wherever the heck that is. Sometimes they say it's in your brain, right? We learn it to be in the heart. And it's weird because it's like, when we get to Diamond Way, we're going to find there really is a little tiny thing in that deep in the heart called the Meshikpe Tigle. It's not the place that all the seeds are stored because their seeds are not things that are there that need to be stored. Not that they're not at all, but there is this tiny little spot from which everything comes. It's just not exactly the same as what is called the storehouse consciousness. So anyway, what am I doing here? So middle way system, mind only. We've told you how we see the illusion. First intellectually, then directly, and then not again directly for probably a very long time, and then not directly constantly until eighth level. How do you, mind only, how do you see the illusion? How do you explain that? And they say, oh, easy. This thing called Rangrik. We have Rangrik constantly. Rangrik means self-perception of the mind. Rik is to know, Rang is self. They explain that as we experience anything, we have the experience of the experience, and we have some awareness of ourself experiencing it as two separate experiences or two separate aspects of the experience. And they say, look, if you if yesterday you looked up at the sky and you said, oh, what a beautiful blue sky, and you knew you were seeing the color blue, and then the next day you're talking to somebody and you say, yesterday I saw this beautiful color blue. They say, in order to say I saw blue today, you had to have had an awareness of yourself seeing the color blue yesterday in order to be able to say, I saw blue yesterday. And they say, because of this constant awareness, like self-awareness of what's actually going on, I would get slaughtered by the word actually, that awareness, self-awareness, is what can perceive the illusion because it's constantly turned on. Like, is there anything wrong with that? Are we constantly aware? Like, are we constantly a subject side? Can we ever have a moment of awareness where we are not subject side? Even those who are studying Mahamudra, and we are looking, like trying to find the me that is the subject side, every time we try to break it down a little bit more, we find a more subtle subject side. And then we even try to look at it as an object, but there has to be a subject looking at the subject as an object, which shows us that our subject side has no nature and shows us that it's never not. It's never not present. And that constant subject side mind that lacks its own nature, that emptiness of that is that thing we call Buddha nature. because your subject mind is always your subject mind. It's never the same two moments in a row, but it never becomes somebody else's subject mind. Because if it could, Buddha's omniscient subject mind would become our mind, and they don't. So subject is always subject. It's never the same two moments in a row, but it's never not existent. And so mind only says, and it's a functioning thing, so it's real. And so it's what can perceive the illusion as it, not sure this is accurate, as it perceives itself perceiving the thing. Because within that can be perceiving the thing as if it's coming from its own karma. Which seems silly for pens. Like pens don't have their own karma, but they have their own causes and conditions. But the angry yelling bots, like we can justify saying, oh, it's angry yelling boss's karma that they're mad at me. I had nothing to do with it. And it's like, Yes, they have their own karma for whatever it is they're experiencing it. I can't know that. All I know is that my karmic seed brought angry yelling boss to me to see them, and me to blame them for this unpleasantness that I'm experiencing. And that's where it goes wrong because it's my seed ripening for me to be not liking what they're doing to me. I created that somehow. So mind only school is very useful. Functioning things real or functioning things not real. Still, whether they're pleasant or unpleasant is coming out of my seed and nothing but, which means my behavior is still critical in mind only school. Yes, Janet.
Can I take a stab at answering Lucia's question between the mind only school and the middle way school definition of dependent origination in reference to the yelling boss? So if it's the yelling
Please.
boss from mind only school, it's because your past deeds caused you to see the yelling boss. It's coming from your past deeds. But the middle way school would say, you're not omniscient. You can't see. The angry boss is yelling at you, and you will get a new job that is better than the job you have now.
So how's that different than what would middle way say about the angry yelling boss?
That it's empty in nature, and because you don't have omniscience, you don't know
Don't know what.
everything about the angry boss.
Right, right. So what's the difference
The
between
mind only says it's coming from your past deeds because you yelled at someone, and therefore you're going to see someone yelling at you.
right and what does mind only school say?
What mind only school says. It's coming from your past deeds, from your past deeds. It's coming from you, your mind.
Right. What's the difference?
That the mind only school says that you have a self in the mind, that that self is not empty.
Right. Do you see how subtle it is? They're
No.
both saying everything is my seeds ripening, and the way my seeds got in there was by way of what I perceived myself thinking, saying, doing before. With functionalist school level, that believes anything that functions has to have some reality unique to it. Let's put it that way. In order for mind only to show ourselves that everything still, not still, everything is dependent upon our behavior and 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 not negate that functioning things have some substantial reality. They explain that this pen with its own causes and conditions, Shenwang nature, it's called, other powered nature, is brought to me by my seed ripening to have a pen when I need it. The pen is a thing. It's not this pen for me until my seed ripens, it and me coming together. So this pen is unique to me, but it started out as a pen not yet unique to me. If we try to pursue that, it's like, well, what pen is it that's not unique to me that I can know about? Like, where is it? Where is it going to be? Mind only school. They go, leave it alone, leave it alone. The fact that here it is when you need it is your goodness, if it's a good thing. Use it. Use it to help somebody so you can be sure you have pens when you need them in the future. Same with angry yelling boss. Where did angry yelling boss come from originally? Leave it, leave it. Angry yelling boss here at the moment, me here knowing them and experiencing it and not liking it, that's my responsibility. Act in a way that doesn't perpetuate them. Run away if you need to and act somewhere else in a way that doesn't bring angry yelling bosses to you in the future. It's really not any different in the end result of our behavior. The difference is whether or not we need to be able to live with the fact that there's no such thing as an angry yelling boss to begin with. And it's like, that just doesn't feel real to me. To in the middle of angry yelling boss yelling at me to think, you don't really exist as anything but my projection. That just doesn't feel helpful. Because they're so in my face at the moment and my anger is arising. And my anger doesn't pop by me saying, oh, this is nothing but my projection. Because my projection is as real as that angry yelling boss functioning thing that I can let be real, but I am not going to perpetuate it because it's unpleasant and I don't like it and nobody else likes it. Yeah, the difference is in the existence of a functioning thing or not. And it's okay. Let them exist and let's change them into all exquisitely beautiful, amazing things. And as we do, the goodness of that will show us that, son of a gun, they never existed the way I thought, but they never didn't exist at all. They've always been my projections, and so has me been my projection. Never any other way than that. And that's what makes everything exist. So we're right back to things existing and functioning as projections. But now we understand projections means real. That's what makes things real. That's what makes things function. But if we're hearing projection and thinking, oh, not real, we're not understanding projections, and we should be mind only and say, oh, okay, they're them, I'm me, but my seed brings us together and makes it pleasant or unpleasant. Yes, Lisa.
Thanks, Nava and Janet. Just two things to understand. So the difference between mind only and mirror way is in mind only, I bring the things together with my seed. In mirror way, I create the yelling boss and myself in the situation of being yelled at. So the difference is creation and the other is putting together.
Bringing together.
Okay, and then the other
You
little
know,
question is,
yeah, that I would say that's a great way to work with it. And then when we say create it, if we then are thinking, well, I should be able to create it in the moment, like by wishing or by willpower, then we're
no,
misunderstanding what we mean by create. But
no,
otherwise,
no,
that's a good distinction.
no, of course, I don't think in the moment
Yeah.
but it's the sense of I am creating, and
Yes.
in the other is already created,
Yeah.
but I bring the
Bring it.
circumstances for
Yes.
me to encounter this other being or object or situation. But then the
Yes.
other question that it pop up in my mind is, so if in my only any functional thing has its own nature, that means me, my mind, has its own nature.
Right. And that's a problem, isn't it? Because if my own nature right now is suffering, how do I change that?
Exactly. And that's what creates for me a contradiction, because then if my mind has its own nature, but you say mind only still tells us you can change by changing your behavior, is a contradiction because I cannot change myself.
Right.
No?
Right. Because where mind only will take you all the way to is seeing emptiness directly after your chuchok and coming out, like with bodhicitta in your heart. Because remember, mind only is a Mahayana school. So by living according to mind only, we will grow our seeds to be able to see emptiness directly. And when we come out of that, we'll go, oh, I get it. Those functioning things are functioning because they're my seeds ripening to be functioning and no other functioning than that. But ta-da, we're at middle way.
And how do you get to that? If I am a mind only believer and I am intellectually understanding it, I
Right?
am giving up before I can get to see emptiness directly, because I realize if my own mind has its own nature and now I am a suffering, depressed being, I will never get out of this.
Well, only if you use that to decide, then I don't need to change my behavior because I'm just stuck. In which case, you're not even mind only, you're not even Buddhist. So if you take your understanding of mind only and go, oh, but if I change my behavior, I can change the seeds ripening what comes to me, you will be making goodness such that your understanding of yourself will grow, will change. Let's put it that way. Change. It is true that we believe we are stuck as suffering beings, but it's not true that we are stuck as suffering beings because our me is empty
But
of
not
any
for mind
nature of
only.
suffering or not suffering.
But for mind only, it's not empty, is it?
Yeah, they're not self-existent. They
Okay,
have
I'm
their
all
own karmic
confused.
seeds. Our mind is part of our karmic seeds ripening, and it exists, and it's real.
And it's a functioning thing.
It's a functioning thing.
And because of that, in mind only, it has some nature on its own.
Not self-existently. Your mind is unique to you. It has its own nature. It's not identical to everybody else's me.
Okay.
Not self-existent, but it is unique to you.
Okay, okay. Okay, thank you, Lam.
Yeah, yeah. It is a cooker, right? It's not obvious. And it's not like the conclusion doesn't hold. Mind only's conclusion doesn't actually hold. And it's like it brings to my mind, it's like, hasn't a mind only school person ever seen emptiness directly with bodhicitta in their heart? That doesn't make sense. Which is why I don't believe it's an actual school that people hold to, that it's an explanation for what our mind does and how we can function at this much more comfortable level, functioning things, let them have some reality, such that how I interact with them will plant the seeds for making a better world. And then use that to grow the goodness so that our wisdom can grow to where we don't need to cling to things as functioning things as real, because that will be as ridiculous as saying the pen has its own nature, right? Self-existently. When functioning things have to be real is absurd as saying the pen is self-existent, right? Then we could probably say we are truly middle way. But it's not like we can't plant our seeds in a better way until we're middle way. We can start anywhere along the line that we think, well, maybe this stuff might work. You know, I still have quite a bit from this class, but let's stop it here. I'll pick up in next class, and if we end up having to keep pushing classes, we'll do it. I promise we'll get it all done. Might take us an extra. No, it won't. We'll do it. But let's stop here. We ended at the wrong Rick question about self-awareness, but we haven't addressed what middle way says about wrong Rick. And it's confusing. So, but I think better to stop here. So you won't be able to finish all your homework for those who are doing. So remember that person we wanted to be able to help at the beginning of class. We have learned stuff that we will use to help them in that deep and ultimate way someday. And that's a great, great goodness. So please be happy with yourself. And think of this goodness like a beautiful glowing gemstone you can hold in your hands. Recall your own precious holy being. See how happy they are with you. Feel your gratitude to them, your reliance upon them. Ask them to please stay close. We continue to guide you, help you, inspire you. And then offer them this gemstone of goodness. See them accept it and bless it. And they carry it with them right back into your heart. See them there, feel them there. Their love, their compassion, their wisdom. It feels so good, we want to keep it forever. And so we know to share it by the power of the goodness that we've just done. May all beings complete the collection of merit and wisdom, and thus gain the true ultimate bodies that merit and wisdom may. So use that three long exhales to share this goodness with that one person. To share it with everyone you love. To share it with every existing being everywhere. See them all filled with loving kindness, filled with wisdom, and may it be so. Okay, thank you for the opportunity to share. Stop recording.